So a while back, I made a cool 3D version of my logo that I like to use on various digital sets and animations on my Twitch stream. Twitch.tv/oraclefishlive, by the way. It looks something like this, and today I'm gonna show you how to do the exact same thing with your logo in Blender 2.9. And before we get started, please do keep in mind that this is an intermediate tutorial. I expect you to have at least a basic understanding of how to navigate the Blender interface. And if you enjoy these kinds of tutorials, the best way to show your support for the channel is to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell. It costs nothing, it helps me out, and most importantly, it lets you know when there's cool new stuff to check out. That being said, let's get started. My name is Chris Folea, I'm your stream scholar. Welcome to StreamSchool. So before we get started actually making our logo, I want to take a brief moment to talk about how Bezier curves in Blender work, since that's what we're going to use to trace our logo in 3D. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 7 on my numpad, make sure I'm in top orthographic view. Gonna select the cube, delete it, select the light, delete it, select the camera, delete it. Gonna hit Shift A on my keyboard, going to select curve and Bezier. And you'll notice that this comes in just like a regular geometry object, like a cube or a cylinder or something in Blender. You can scale it hitting S on your keyboard, you can move it hitting G for grab on your keyboard, or you can rotate it by hitting R on your keyboard. Again, just like any normal geometry object. The differences are when you go into edit mode instead of object mode. So if we hit tab to go into edit mode, you'll notice now that each point looks a lot different than a geometry object. So if we select this point right here, you'll notice we have 2 handles coming off of it. So the center point dictates where that point on the curve is located in 3D or 2D space. And then each handle dictates how the curve behaves branching off of that point. So for instance, if I have this point selected, I can do G for grab to move it, I can do R for rotate to rotate it, or I can do S for scale to scale it. Or I could select this handle by clicking on it. Then if I do G to grab, you'll notice the point stays in place and only the handle moves. So doing this, I can manipulate the curves. I can also hit S to scale the handle to make it shorter or longer, and the curve will behave appropriately. Or I can hit R to rotate and rotate the handle around the center point. We can do the exact same thing with the other side, and we can make some interesting shapes. Now, if we want to make this shape even more interesting, we probably need more than 2 points. And extruding these points works exactly the same as extruding a normal point in Blender in geometry. So I select this point, hit E on my keyboard to extrude. I now have another point that's actually a duplicate of that point, but it's connected. So I can hit E to extrude that, maybe move it over here. I can hit R to rotate it, hit E to extrude that, rotate that, and you'll notice that as I move this around, if we hit tab to go back to object mode, this is an opened curve. It's not closed, it's just a line. And you can close this by selecting 2 points that have a gap between them and hitting F. And that will create the joining segment. So now if I scale this down, we have what looks kind of like an ocarina, I guess, honestly. But then, let's say we want this to be a line again. We can hit tab to go into edit mode. We can select these 2 points. We can hit delete and segments, and that will open it right back up. We can also delete other segments on here, and now we have 2 lines. So those are your options for doing that. Let's say I want this object to be closed, but let's also say we don't want this to be perfectly round. Let's say we want some harsh corners on here. Well, for one, we could take this point and we could scale it down, and that'll give us a corner. Or we could get some actual sharp corners by hitting V, and you'll notice we have a bunch of different options here. This sets the handle type. So you'll notice if I click this point on this handle and I move it, the other side of the handle moves with it. So if I make this bigger, it's easier to see, but you'll notice that these move together. It's that the handles stay in a straight line. If we select the midpoint, hit V and go to free, now if I move this handle, it moves independently of the other handle. And there are some other handle points as well. We have vector and automatic, But the two that we need to pay attention to for the purpose of this tutorial are aligned and free. You can make pretty much any shape you want with just these two. And this is on a per point basis as well. So this handle is still aligned. These handles are set to free. You can even technically set individual handles to aligned or free, but if one's set to aligned and one is free, they're gonna act just like they're free. So that's the first part of how curves behave in Blender. That's how you make shapes, and you have a whole lot of freedom here to make all sorts of complicated shapes once you know this. One other thing you can do if you have a closed segment but you want more detail on it, is you can select that point, right click, and subdivide it. Then we have another point in between, and we can add more detail. But that is the basis of how to make curve shapes in Blender. So if I hit Tab to go back to object mode, you'll notice we also have a curves panel over here on the right. So this is set to 3D by default. That means if we rotate around in 3D space, we can move these points around in 3D space as much as we want. And that can give us some interesting results. It's actually very useful for making pipes and things. But since we're making like a flat extruded 3D medallion of our logo, we actually want this to be in 2D space, which means that this point will not move up and down. It'll only move around in 2D space, which is exactly what we want. So then, if we go down to fill mode, we can set this to both. That will fill the top and bottom once we've extruded it. Then, if we go to geometry, you'll notice there's an extrude slider. If we click and drag on that, you'll notice nothing is really happening, and that's because we're looking at this from the top. But if we look around in 3D, you'll notice that this is now extruding into a 3D object. And this is important for me to show you right now because of how this behaves. So if we hit Tab to go into edit mode, we hit Shift A to add, and we add a circle, you'll notice that we now have two individual objects. We have a circle, and we have our deformed lumpy ocarina or submarine. But if we take the circle and hit G to move it inside here and scale it down, you'll notice now that it's cutting away from our object. It's cutting a hole straight through it. So the reason this is important to understand is because as we're working on our logo, we're going to want to keep our curves separate until the end when we actually convert them to 3D. So for instance, if I hit P and separate this circle to make it its own object, then hit Tab to go out of edit mode into object mode, now we have this, and we can extrude this guy a little bit more to make him a separate shape. And that's all there is to that. That's just important to understand as we move forward. So now that you understand the basics of curves, there's a little bit more detail here. You can also add a bevel to your object under the geometry panel, which will offset it. And then you can offset that as well from your designated curve. And that is a non-destructive workflow. If we go into transparent mode by holding Z and going to wireframe, you notice as we offset it, we still have our base curve that we drew, that all of this is based on. The offset is completely non-destructive, as is the bevel. So now that you have a basic understanding, I know I moved a little bit fast there, but now that you have a basic understanding of how Bezier curves in Blender work, we can move on to actually creating our logo. So for that, I'm going to select this curve and delete it, select this curve and delete it. Then I'm going to hit Shift A on my keyboard, go to Image, and we're going to create a reference image. So mine personally is located under my StreamSchool folder. You need to find your logo. So I'm going to grab my fish logo, and this is what we're going to create for this is what I'm going to create for my tutorial. You can, at this point, you can either watch what I do and then try to do it later, or you can try to follow along with your own logo. But as we start here, after I've imported my reference, I'm going to go to the image tab right here. I'm going to check the transparency box, and I'm going to set this down to a lower transparency so we can see our outline as we're working on it. Having these colors too vivid makes it pretty difficult to see your curve. And there's one other option here if you want to skip the tracing altogether. If you have an SVG file of your logo, or scalable vector graphics file of your logo, you can go to File, Import SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, and you can import that. And it'll come in, it'll have everything already traced for you, but trust me when I say that tracing it yourself will yield much cleaner results. So I'm gonna undo that and let's get started tracing this. So the outside of my logo is a circle. That's really easy to accomplish. I can just go to Add or hit Shift A on my keyboard, Curve, Circle, hit Tab to go into Edit mode, S to scale it up until it about matches my logo, hit Tab to exit, and then do it again. Shift A, Curve, Circle, Tab, scale it up, Tab to go back to object mode. And you'll notice until we get to making this 3D, I'm keeping all of my curves separate objects. That is very important just to keep things separate, clean, and organized until we get to the 3D point. Otherwise, it will just get confusing unless you are really comfortable and know what you're doing. So then we have some more complex shapes to trace here. So I'm gonna start with the exterior of the fish, then maybe do one more object, and then I'll speed it up and see you on the other side. But let's go ahead and trace the outside of my fish, or whatever it is you want to trace. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit Shift A. I'm gonna add a Bezier curve, hit Tab to go into edit mode, and we're gonna start on this corner right here. And you notice this is a sharp corner, so I probably don't want this to be aligned. I'm gonna hit V, go to Free, select this handle and move it down so it's matching up with that edge. Select this handle and move it so it's about matching up with that edge. Now this one is going to a round part of the logo, so I probably want this one to stay aligned. And I'm just gonna, again, use the same keys, R to rotate, S to scale, and G to move. And you absolutely can use the widgets here if you really want to move things, but trust me when I say the hotkeys are going to make your life so much easier. So I'm gonna go back to my selection tool and I'm just gonna use the hotkeys. G to move, S to scale, R to rotate. And I'm gonna adjust these handles until it about matches up with the logo. And the more you get comfortable with this, the faster you'll get at it for sure. You'll be able to estimate what handles should be doing to get the shape you want. These outlines are slightly different colors. I'm gonna make them one color for my 3D logo. So this one probably needs to be free. I want this to be a harsh corner. And these aren't quite matching up with my logo, so probably want more detail here. So I can select this point, right click, and say subdivide. This one probably needs to be aligned. So I'm gonna hit V, scale it, move it around until it about matches up. I can scale this down, and now we have a curve that matches pretty well. So then, I'm just gonna extrude it out. Probably take this one to the tip right here, make it aligned, rotate it, scale it down. This handle's not quite matching up, so I'm gonna move that one. And again, I don't think I need to repeat all of the keys I'm pressing here. First of all, they're showing down here, but also I'm doing the exact same things over and over again. So here I decided I needed more detail, so I subdivided. And you can add as many points as you want, but I would be hesitant to add more points than you absolutely need. Getting the shapes you need with as few points as possible with Bezier curves is a real art form, and it's very nice. If you add too many points, you really start to bog yourself down. So try to get away with as few points as possible, but when you need to add detail, you need to add detail. So again, same hotkeys, E to extrude. I'm gonna scale this in until the shape matches. And move this out. Probably wanna add some more detail here, so I'm gonna subdivide that. And again, exact same keys, G to move, S to scale, R to rotate, all the way around. Going to extrude right here. Scale this bad boy in until it matches. And the more you practice this, the faster you'll get at it, but it still is tedious and time consuming, especially depending on the complexity of your logo. If you have like a really complicated logo, this is probably gonna take a decent amount of time. If you have a very simple logo, it's probably gonna go pretty quick. Unfortunately, I have a pretty complicated logo, so this is gonna take a decent amount of time for me. I'm gonna subdivide this one because I need more detail. Scale this in until the curve matches. Select this point, extrude it down here. Scale this one out, scale this one out. Probably need to subdivide this one. And you'll also notice that when you subdivide a point, the overall shape of the curve is not modified until you move the point. So it subdivides intelligently. I'm gonna extrude this one down, like so. Scale this out. I probably need to subdivide this one. Scale this, just like so. Extrude this one. Probably need to subdivide these. And I chose this complex shape first just to spend a bit more time explaining every thought along the process. And this is more of a harsh corner we can get away with here. So I'm gonna hit V on my keyboard, set this to free, and just scale this in. Extrude this out. These can probably be aligned again. And this part of the logo is a little bit lumpy, so it probably doesn't need to match up 100% perfectly. Then again, I am a perfectionist, so you do you, I guess. Rotate this one down here, scale it on up, just like so. Hit V, set this one to free since we have a corner here. Extrude it on out. I'm gonna move this one all the way down here to the next corner. Gonna select these two and subdivide them. And again, this is gonna be situational to your logo and what shapes you need to match. But I probably need to subdivide this even one more time just to get some extra detail in here. Like so. Subdivide that. And beautiful, we have that curve matching and we're almost done with the outer fish shape. So I'm going to extrude this, probably to this point right here. Modify the handles to match. Sometimes the handles get a little bit reversed, so you have to make sure your handles are facing in the right direction. Here, we can probably put the tail at a point if we really want to. So I'm just gonna extrude this down here. And again, situational to your own logos in your own situations. This being at a point means I need to actually extend it out a little bit further. Probably subdivide this. Set this one to aligned. Rotate it down, scale it. I probably also need to really subdivide this one if I'm being 100% honest. Move this point in just like that. Extrude this one up. Or these ones I can just go ahead and hit F to close it. Then adjust these handles to the best of my ability. And then maybe subdivide it one more time just for the extra detail. And what I mean by that is you'll notice by default, you can actually see how the curve is made up of individual facets, like there are corners here. And if you subdivide this, that gives you more subdivisions. So subdividing it gives me more detail in that way. Or if you come over to the curves panel, you can up the resolution as well of your curve to get rid of that. The render resolution will, I believe, subdivide it as much as it needs to be. I'm not 100% sure on that. Anyway, I'm gonna give it more detail, set this one to aligned, and that is our external fish shape. So I'm gonna do maybe 2 more shapes, and then I'm gonna speed this up since you understand the process. Anyway, I'm gonna leave edit mode. You can switch between edit and object mode here, or just by hitting tab on your keyboard. Again, make sure you're in object mode before you start the next shape. I'm gonna hit Shift A, go to curve, Bezier, and let's work on the eye. Gonna go to edit mode, move this point right here. The eye should be pretty easy. I can just make both of these free. Select the individual handles. Select these 2 and hit F. Select the handle. Select the point, select the handle. And we have our eye. Looks pretty cool. So now for a more complex shape, I'm gonna go out of edit mode, hit Shift A, curve, Bezier, hit tab to go into edit mode. Gonna adjust this. We probably want to subdivide this just to have a point in between, give us some extra detail here. Move these around. Set this one to free. Set this one to free. Extrude this. V aligned. Move this like so. Hit F to close that off and adjust these handles. And we have those shapes. So for the sake of this logo, I need to trace out every single shape here. And that's gonna take a while. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed up the tutorial. So time lapse, just so you can see what I'm doing. But overall, it's the same repetitive tasks that we've been doing. Add a curve, adjust the curve, in edit mode, go back to object mode, add another curve. So I'll see you all on the other side. So all said and done, that took probably the half an hour. I'll flash the actual time up on the screen. I wasn't really paying attention, but if I select my reference and hit H to hide it, you'll see that now I have a curve object for literally every aspect of my logo. And it's important to note here that I also did the exterior and interior of the outlines because we're gonna need that. So now comes the fun part. I'm actually gonna subdivide this a little bit further just to get a little bit more resolution in there. Now comes the fun part, which is art directing this thing. You have to decide which things you want to extrude further and which things you want to extrude not as much. And what I mean by that is, what I could do right here is set this to 2D, extrude it, set the fill mode to both, and that gives us a disk. Then for the inside of the stroke, I could set that to 2D, set that to both, and extrude that. And now that gives us the logo. So we have sort of a wedding cake pattern here, where it's like the light outline, the dark center. Alternatively, we could cut this circle out of the main circle to make it sort of a donut, and that's what I would prefer to do. So I'm gonna select the interior curve and the exterior curve. I'm gonna hit Control J to join those two, and now you'll notice that the interior one is cutting out of the exterior one. So the next piece that I might want to do that with is the overall dark outline. So I'll select this, everything that makes that up. So I'll select this curve, and this curve. And at this point with your logo, just select the things that you think belong together and join them. So I'm gonna select that curve, and that curve, and I'm gonna hit Control J to join them. Now they're one curve object. I'm gonna set it to 2D, go to fill mode both, and now you'll notice we have just this outline piece, which is really cool. And for the eye, that's its own thing. So I'm gonna hit Alt H really quick to look at my logo. And if you think here, we probably want all of these pieces that are the same color to be one curve object. So at this point in the process, just go through and join everything that you think belongs together. So like these fin pieces right here are all the same color as this shading, 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 this shading. I'm just holding Shift to select multiple of them. So then I might hit Control J to join those. Hit 2D under the curves panel, set that to both, and extrude that. And then this shading and this shading are the same color, so I can hit Control J, set that to 2D, not doody. That's a weird thing to say. And then we can extrude this. And you'll notice we're missing some pieces now, and that's because we used the interior body and the interior of the fin color to cut out from the outline. So we'll duplicate that in just a second. But we can select the eye, set that to 2D since that'll be its own object. We can extrude that, Set it to both so it actually fills the caps. So this fill mode, by the way, if you set that to none, you only extrude the exterior. If you set it to front, you only get a cap on the top. If you set it to both, you get a cap on top and bottom. So that's what that is. That's why that's important. Now this outline, we can probably join with our other outline. And now we have our fish coming together. So then as you construct this, you need to think about which pieces of your logo need to be the thickest. If it's thicker, it's visible on top of something else. So if I make this outline the thickest out of everything, or the same as this outline. So this outline, let's make it like 0.1. This one, I'll also make 0.1. I'll match those two. Those are the most extruded pieces on the fish. So now you'll notice we're missing the body. So let's go ahead and we're missing the body, and we're missing the background here as well. So let's go ahead and fix that. So first of all, to get the body, let's select our outline object, hit Tab. Then I'm gonna hit Alt-A to deselect everything. I'm gonna hover over a vertex of one of the curves that I want to select, and I'm gonna hit L on my keyboard. So that selects just this entire body piece. If I drag it out, it's no longer cutting a hole. If I drag it back in, it's still cutting a hole. What I'm gonna do though, is I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, right click to leave it in place. Then I'm gonna hit P, and where it says okay, I'm gonna click separate, and that'll separate it into its own object. You'll notice it's extruded a little bit far compared to the fins and the eyes and stuff. So we can set this down to maybe 0.05, sorry. So now we have the eye extruding out further, we have the shading extruding out further, and we have the fill extruded in out the least. I'm gonna set all of these things to 0.08 maybe. Hit Control C and paste that there. Paste that on the eye. Paste that on all the shading and everything. Then let's do the exact same thing for the fin. So Alt-A to deselect everything in our edit mode. Hit L, Shift D to duplicate, right click to set it in place, P to separate, Tab to go back to object mode, select it, and then we'll set it to 0.05 on the extrude. So now we just have one more piece to do, and that's going to be the circle in the very background, which if we think about it, we want all of this stuff to be visible on top of that circle, so that circle needs to be extruded the least. So I'm going to select my ring, hit Tab, Alt-A to deselect everything, hit L to select the inner circle, Shift D to duplicate, right click to put it in place, P to separate. I know it's a lot of hotkeys, bear with me. Hit Tab to go back to object mode, select the circle, and we'll set this extrude maybe at a 0.04. And there we have it, our 3D logo. And you can construct this, again, free creative freedom on how you want to construct this. Maybe you want the outline to be cut out. Maybe you want the centerpiece to be wedding cake stacked. That's all up to you. I did this the way that I wanted to. So I might take some of these things like the outline and try to bevel them just a little bit. You will realize very quickly if you try to bevel things that are very sharp, you're gonna get some artifacts. So I'd just be careful about that. Maybe try to round it off, make it less sharp. I'm not gonna worry about it for the sake of this tutorial. Also, if you bevel it, and it does cause some artifacts, one way to fix it, or to try to fix it, could be to offset in the other direction. Because you'll notice when you bevel, that it offsets it outward from your main outline. So you can undo that by offsetting in the negative direction. And that can give you potentially better results. Beveling things does make them look nice. I'm not going to worry about it too much here because we're already running pretty long on this tutorial. But play with it. Come up with something that looks good for your logo. If you don't have a bunch of really sharp corners, then the beveling will probably work fine. Regardless, that is how you make the 3D logo. Now let's add some color to it. So if we go to our top view and we split this viewport, set this to let's split it one more time. Set this to an image editor. Grab our logo reference so we can color pick colors. Then I'm gonna select the outline. Just one object at a time here. I'm gonna go to rendered preview mode so we can actually see the colors. And you might want to add a light here as well, just so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to add a sun. And I'm going to rotate it at an angle just so we have some lighting on our logo. And for this, I'm going to give it some contact shadows. And what we can also do to make this a little bit more visible is we can add some ambient occlusion as well. Up the distance, maybe the factor. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why that's not occluding better. You mess with that just to see your shapes better. We're going to, or you can set this view to the rendered preview. Do whatever you're comfortable with and set this one to solid. But what you can do up here. Select the outline, go to the materials panel. I'm gonna hit new. This is gonna be fish outline. You don't actually have to name these. I would personally recommend it though. Select the base color. I'm gonna grab the picker and pick somewhere in between since this is a gradient. Looking cool. And I'm gonna make mine metallic. I want it to be like, I want it to shine like metal. So now it looks like it's a metal medallion of some sort. We can also change the roughness of this if we want it to be like super shiny, or we can make it really rough. I think like 0.35 is pretty good for a typical metal. So now it sheens in the light as we rotate around. I'm gonna go ahead and, yeah, there we go. So now we have a good view of this. Then for the backdrop, make another new material, color pick it. I'm gonna color pick somewhere in between. Make this one also metallic. And we'll make this one also 0.35. And that's pretty dark, so I might even make that a little bit brighter. Something like that. Looks pretty cool. So, and then move on to every other piece. So the outlines here, make a new one, color pick the outlines, which we might need to make brighter to compensate. Yeah, definitely make that brighter, I think. Especially if you're going metallic, the colors usually end up a little bit darker. So color picking is not gonna be 100% exact science here, but you know what to do at this point. Just mess with it, have fun. Make this also metallic. You can look around, make this one like 0.3. And you don't have to make these metallic. You can also make them plastic if you want to. Sorry, 0.3 on the roughness is what I meant to do. Yeah, there we go. So I got like our nice shiny fish logo that sheens in the light. Now for this shading, add a new one, color pick it. Make that one metallic, roughness 0.3. Just because I want mine to be a metal 3D logo. We can select this shading, new, color pick that. Set that to metallic. Roughness 0.3. Now the eye, you'll notice, is glowing and emitting light. So for that one, I'm going to do new. I'm going to set this one to emission. Maybe set it to like 5. Notice it's not casting light because this is Eevee, and objects don't do that in Eevee. But what we can do is give it some bloom. So if we go to bloom, now it'll glow, which looks pretty cool. Finally, the back of the fin, we can just select the body, hit Control L to link materials, and now those will match. And obviously, you're gonna wanna play with your own colors, make it look nice. I really, really want that bevel. So I'm gonna bevel this just a little bit, maybe like 0.01. Just a little bit so it catches the light, you know? You can do that for all of these. Because it looks so much nicer. Bevel 0.01. And that's looking pretty cool. Bevel 0.01. So and finally, to make all of these the same object, I would not recommend joining these in the way that we joined multiple curves, because that will just mess everything up. So instead, what you can do is you can select all of your curves. I'm using the outliner. You can also select them in your viewport. I'm gonna hit M on my keyboard, M for mom. I'm going to say new collection, and I'll call this logo medallion. Hit enter again. So now you notice we have an extra collection up here in the right, and I'm gonna uncheck that. Going to select my reference and delete it. But then I can hit add collection instance and grab logo medallion. And I can rotate this around. It's all just one object. You can't edit this because it's just an instance of that collection. But now let's move our medallion up here. If we do modify this, you'll notice that our instance gets modified along with it. That actually looks pretty cool. No complaints here. Looks kind of like a guitar pick. And we can hide our collection again, and our logo has been edited. And that also allows you to make a lot of duplicates. And if you edit just the main collection, it'll edit all of them, which is pretty cool. I'm gonna undo all of that. But that is how you make your 3D logo in Blender. One final note here is if your logo has text, you can trace it the same way that we traced all of this, but that's very tedious. So what you can do is, let's say we had text around this. We could say, or under, we could say Shift A, text, move that down here, type it. I'm gonna say Oracle. And you can change the font under the text panel here. You can go down to font, folder, grab a font that you like. I'm gonna go to my Google fonts. Grab Windy One. Shut it, Google. Oh man. Grab it. And then what you can do is you can, well, for one, if you don't want to modify this at all, you can just extrude it and bevel it directly from the text panel. But if you do want to modify the points on this to make them curve across or whatever, you can hit F3, type to bring up your search menu, do convert to, and curve from mesh/text. So now if you hit tab, it's an actual curve object, and you can manipulate individual pieces of this to like rotate around, for instance. Which this is the jankiest looking text I have ever seen in my entire life, but it's not horrible. Yeah, it is. Then we can extrude that and bevel it in the exact same way that we did the rest of our logo. Like so. And then maybe match the outline. Like so. Add this to our logo collection. Turn that off, and now we have our medallion logo. So anyway, that is how you can make a 3D logo in Blender. I know I moved quickly through some of that stuff. Hopefully you were able to follow along what you use this for. I don't know, that's gonna be up to you, but that is how you make a 3D logo in Blender. Hopefully at this point you have a cool new 3D version of your logo to use for, well, whatever you want. If you have any questions or just want to come hang out with an incredible community, I'm live at least every Friday at twitch.tv/oraclefishlive. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below the video for new content every single week. Until next time, my name is Chris Folea, I'm your stream scholar, and class is out.